From an outside perspective, the sport of football can be considered a barbaric, violent, and mostly brainless sport. Which to an extent is true when you witness grown men screaming at each other and tackling one another. However, to the contrary, football requires more attention to detail and preparation against the opposing team than appears to the naked eye, and playing at the professional level requires an extensive amount of knowledge. The text I chose to cover for this assignment was The Art of Smart Football by Chris B. Brown, which entails how analytics in the sport of football created a never-ending cycle of understanding the opposition while continuously innovating ways to beat them. However, analytics in football isn't entirely mathematical probabilities and advanced efficiency ratings. Rather, in this text, Brown details how some of the sport's smartest coaches and managers made subtle changes in players' positioning and personnel substitutions to have output and subsequently evolving the game into what we know it is now. Three of the most prominent examples of football analytics in this text will be covered next. Our first instance of analytics creating revolutionary moments in football starts in 1993 when current Dallas Cowboys head coach Mike McCarthy was hired as a quarterback assistant for the Kansas City Chiefs. He would be working alongside offensive coordinator Paul Hackett, and their first assignment was to accommodate their new veteran quarterback acquired over the offseason. You might have heard of him by the name of Joe Montana, a four-time Super Bowl champion and often mentioned in conversations when discussing the best to ever do it. So, what was McCarthy able to teach Montana? Not surprising to many, but there wasn't much for Montana to grasp this late in his career. Therefore, the teaching-learning rules reversed in a way, as McCarthy was able to identify desirable attributes in his quarterback to apply to players he would work with later on for future reference. And exactly that he did. Nearly 20 years later, McCarthy was hired as the head coach for the Green Bay Packers in 2006. Only this time, McCarthy had a young prodigy he was ready to mold into a superstar with his acquired knowledge from coaching Montana. This quarterback was Aaron Rodgers, and it's safe to say that McCarthy's plan was successful, as Rodgers has gone on to win Super Bowl 45 in 2011 and winning his fourth regular season MVP in this past 2021 season. Although neither is directly responsible for each other's success, it was the culminations of both sides buying into the process and trusting one another. The first collaboration between them started when McCarthy first got to Green Bay and noticed that Rodgers' throwing motion was too slow, allowing defenses to take advantage of reaction times. Through intense data analytics on Rodgers' throwing time and a little trial and error, McCarthy was able to cut his throwing time in half by moving where Rodgers holds the ball from up near his ear to more a natural position between his chest and his throwing shoulder. McCarthy achieved this by eliminating the extra and unnecessary movement Rodgers made by bringing the ball back towards his body before he decided to throw. This was only the beginning of their collaborative genius, as McCarthy continued to evolve his quarterback by next implementing his old offensive scheme into his new team, the West Coast offense, a scheme built around to confuse defenses with similar formations alongside attacking points in the defense that gives themselves the best probability of scoring. Each player has a designated role in the West Coast offense, as most do, except these roles always aren't made out to have a direct effect on the play, but moreover, draw a defender away from where the play is going, and when the defense catches on to this act, the offense has a perfect opportunity to score with a player unaccounted for by the defense. Hailed from several decades ago, the West Coast scheme was considered geriatric before McCarthy's modernized implementation back behind the numbers, as more and more teams are starting to use the West Coast, resurging a once obsolete idea. Our second historic football moment, fueled by data analytics, begins in the 1980s, where football consisted of nothing but pass-heavy offenses. Quarterbacks always made the correct read, made an accurate throw, and most importantly, didn't turn the ball over. This was fun for spectators to see all of the explosive plays, although there was a serious margin of skill between the league's offenses and defenses. Dick LeBeau was the Cincinnati Bengals defensive back coach at the time and started to study how his defense was getting significantly less pressure when playing man coverage. Alongside this, he also noticed how receivers can take advantage of the space given to them by cornerbacks to make sudden and perpendicular cuts in their routes with man coverage. Through experimenting with the probability of winning the play and defensive concepts for each subgroup, LeBeau created the zone blitz defense, combining pressuring blitzes with expansive, smothering zone coverages. At the time of its creation, it was a wild theory, and LeBeau was considered crazy by some for it. After finally getting approval for experimentation by his defensive coordinator, Sam Wyke, the zone blitz was officially conceived. In its preliminary stages, it took the league by storm, confusing offenses that would have been considered unstoppable before. LeBeau would go on to win 2 Super Bowls as a defensive coordinator with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were well known for their zone blitz defense. Even in today's NFL, this concept is still relevant as all 32 teams average running a zone blitz for 20% of their defensive plays. This was personally my favorite piece of the story. As a Steelers fan, I've always loved coaches like Dick LeBeau, but never actually knew he was the pioneer of this concept all that time ago. This piece of football history is also very integral to the Steelers' success over the years, as they were able to build their team identity around this concept, so I find it very interesting reading about this and covering it for an assignment. Our third case of data analytics assisting in the evolution of football starts in 2013. Recently retired New Orleans Saints head coach Sean Payton receiving a season-long suspension from team activity due to his involvement in what is known as Bountygate, where he allegedly incentivized his players to intentionally hurt the opposition. This is all unrelated to this story, but it is what resulted in Payton coaching his son's 6th grade football team, the Liberty Christian Warriors, instead of the Saints that season. As you could imagine, an NFL-level coach overlooking a team of 6th graders helped them tremendously, as they went on to play in the championship game that year. However, this was no walk in the park for them. They were going up against the Springtown Orange Porcupines, a team they already lost to in the regular season, 38-6. This was a big game for Payton's son, so that meant an even bigger game for Payton himself. Therefore, he decided to reach out to some of his NFL friends of the likes of Bill Parcells and John Gruden for some extra insight. With the combined power of these 3 football masterminds, there was no way Payton's Warriors were going to lose to the Porcupines. The Porcupines ended up beating the Warriors 58-18, an absolute blowout, leaving Payton in complete confusion. After the game, he couldn't help himself but to ask Springville's coach for some insight. Their coach, Rob Adams, told Payton that they used a single wing formation, an extremely complicated scheme, but with a twist. It was modernized and accommodated to be so easy that 6th graders could understand. And, as you could probably also guess, this was done only in part by data analytics. The wing formation is successful due to its winning play probabilities when you combine the aspects of a lopsided formation, multiple pre-snap motions and ball fakes in every play, and focusing on attacking the weaknesses of the defense. But if the single wing formation is so optimal, why doesn't everybody use it? When it was first created, the names of the plays, or play calls, were extremely long and hard to remember, along with being very similar to one another when they could have 2 very different meanings. This created massive confusion for teams, which ended up throwing out the idea altogether. Adams was able to achieve this concept for his team by only using a playbook of 12 different plays, nothing that would cause a mental overload on a kid. He also made the names of these plays things kid would remember, so their power run play was pizza and their spinner toss play was spaghetti. Every play was a counter of the last, leaving the defense scratching their head. Adams found a middle ground between the complicated X's and O's of football and the simple mind of a child playing their favorite sport. But the main message here is that there are endless ways to succeed in football, especially back behind the numbers of data analytics.